the European Parliament staging a minute of silence, this to honor the memory of Daphne Caruana Galizia, the Maltese journalist killed Monday in the car bomb explosion of her vehicle near her home. The 53-year-old investigative reporter had warned of death threats 2 weeks ago, and half an hour before her death, she'd written about a libel claim the Prime Minister's chief of staff had brought against a former opposition member over comments the latter made about corruption. Galizia had been working on Malta's links to the Panama Papers revelations of money laundering and tax evasion. For more, let's go to Berlin, and a member of the European Parliament, Sven Giegold of the Green Party. Thank you for speaking with us here on France 24. What does your gut tell you about who did this?
Well, obviously, I do not know who did it. What I know is, because I know Daphne and her work, she has been working on major cases of corruption, money laundering, economic crime and irresponsibility in Malta. So she has clearly made enemies. She knew she was in danger. She didn't get the protection she deserved, and now she's dead, which is a very sad moment, not only for her and her family, but also for the freedom of expression and journalism in Europe and in Malta.
Malta, which is come up a lot in the committee that you're in inside of the European Parliament that looks into money laundering and tax evasion.
This is true. So I was in Malta. I have been working on Malta several times. We had Daphne as a witness in our committee while we were in Malta. And what she has revealed is that several high-level cases of money laundering and corruption were researched properly by the Anti-Money Laundering Authority of Malta. And these revelations were then sent to the police and nothing happened. So there was a culture of impunity when it touched upon the most powerful interests, including some members of the government. And it's because of this that Malta is really a special case of a lack of clear prosecution and enforcement of law.
Let's listen, if you will, Sven Giegold, to the Prime Minister. Galizia had previously written that the wife of Joseph Muscat, the country's energy minister, and the government's chief of staff had offshore holdings in Panama to receive money from Azerbaijan. Muscat and his wife Michelle deny. He says his government is thinking of offering a reward to catch the criminals who killed Galizia.
What I'm telling the police is that they should tackle this investigation like there is no tomorrow. If there's someone in this country, only one person who wants justice to be done apart from the family, it is me.
Sven Giegold, do you take Joseph Muscat at his word?
Of course, I always take a prime minister seriously, but what matters here is not only to find the ones responsible for the murder, it is also to take the work of Daphne Galizia seriously, and that means that those are brought to justice whose wrongdoings she was revealing. And this is what is not happening in Malta. So clearly, myself and also colleagues in the European Parliament, we have now invited the Sun to come to the Parliament and we will pressure Malta to take all these cases seriously. So what the Prime Minister is doing now is basically concentrating his efforts on finding the murderer, which is very important, but also in order to get out of the light for all the cases of corruption and money laundering which were not prosecuted until today. And this has to be tackled as well.
A reporter for the Daily Mail has written this Tuesday that Galizia told him that a recent visit by Tony Blair to Malta could be linked to Muscat and to Azerbaijan. Your thoughts on that?
I don't have any intelligence on this visit. What is known is that there were privatization proceedings with Azerbaijan, which is already very strange for a social democratic government. And some of the revelations which were made public by Daphne, based on research from the anti-money laundering authority of Malta, involved also actors from Azerbaijan. And this is exactly what has to be clarified in all depth. And if Mr. Muscat wants to be taken seriously, he has to come forward with a clearly, with a tough and thorough and independent investigation of these facts.
What can you do in the long run when you have a small island nation like Malta and there is this oil money that's pouring through?
Well, obviously, we have European legislation. I wrote to the Commission to enforce EU money laundering law in Malta with treaty violation procedures, which they haven't done until today. They have not answered yet my questions, but the Parliament can use its powers to pressure the Commission to ensure law enforcement, and the partner countries, of course, can put pressure on Malta to take our common standards of good governance and enforcement of European law seriously. And this is what I expect. We have now to turn our eyes on Malta, and I expect that from France, Germany, the United Kingdom and others, really to use that moment in order to come clear with problems of money laundering and hyper-low tax rates in Malta.
The Commission spokesperson on Tuesday sidestepped a question from a reporter asking whether or not the EU should be looking into whether or not the rule of law is being respected in Malta, much as the same way that there is this investigation for Poland. What should be done?
Well, it's exactly this. So I have written to the Commission detailed questions when it came to banking supervision law, as well as legislation against money laundering, where I believe that there are strong reasons that the European legislation was not properly implemented, and it's the role of the Commission as the guardian of the European treaties to ensure that this is now happening. And the same applies, by the way, to the European Central Bank, because if banks in Malta do not properly apply anti-money laundering law, this poses also a systemic risk to these banks, and therefore also the ECB should do something about banks which are not serious in implementing anti-money laundering rules.
So what you're saying is nothing much has changed since the Panama Papers revelations?
Exactly. Nothing much has changed. The only thing which has changed is that some people who were the most credible ones in the anti-money laundering authority have lost their jobs and were replaced by people who are clearly less independent. So therefore things went even worse. And those companies which has opened the Panama companies for their clients in Malta, they still have their license, although the Panama Papers prove that they didn't do their due diligence properly. So there was basically no serious consequence of the Panama Papers in Malta.
Sven Giegold, member of the European Parliament for the Greens, many thanks for speaking with us from Berlin.